content over everything.
So it has been closed on this year. Now lately,
All right, we're away, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, I'm hoping that today we can talk about the election campaign, but particularly about how to campaign, because I think that's about tactics and methods, and I think that will have a big impact on the election. Not what we do has a big impact, but the method by which people campaign can have a big impact on the election. So that's what we can contribute a little bit on.
Do you think this election is about Brexit?
I think it's about class and generations, and how class politics can be raised, elevated to the fore through generational politics.
Yeah, this is not like back in the past. This is a whole different thing. Yeah, there's the elites who are disconnected with the class, and then there's also the interconnecting class movements when it comes to nationalism or other socialism or other things. You know.
That's all true, but the election itself is going to be decided by. I mean, all the indications are that the election will be decided. Let me go up a little bit.
Football hooligans who are, going Boris.
Yeah, but on the other side, the main distinguishing indicator in the polls so far has been the differentiation, as it was in 2017, between the youth vote and the older generation. So under 49s are overwhelmingly in support of the Labour Party. So that's what all the opinion polls have shown. Overwhelmingly in support of Jeremy Corbyn and the Labour Party. So if you can get the youth vote to mobilise in a similar way to that which happened in 2017, where you may remember that places like Colchester, as a result of students going to vote, suddenly turned Labour for the first time. And that is where I think the battle line is actually drawn in this election. So what I was interested in trying to focus on in today's meeting is how we get to that youth vote and how we mobilise them and enthuse them behind the campaign to get the Labour Party elected. What's the matter with that? What? What's that?
They're registering.
What's that?
I'm not allowed to record with.
I mean, we've been through this plenty of times at the meetings at the Parks Police. If you ask Steve Barnes, we've gone through this dozens of times.
We thought the same as you, but we've just been told to move you on. We're just going to clarify it with our inspector.
You've been told to move
Is Steve here?
No, it's just the equipment, using professional equipment.
I mean, there's an election going on. All sorts of things are happening.
It's not my decision.
I'm a Labour Party speaker.
Yeah.
I don't see how it can be justified that the few minutes.
We're checking it. I'm not
Okay.
sure.
It seems that young people are actually registering in huge numbers.
That's correct. It is true that there has been a big registration drive.
A surge.
If you like, what we need is the enthusiasm amongst a layer of people, particularly momentum activists and Labour supporters and Corbyn supporters, to be transformed into some kind of wave, a movement, like we saw in 2017. And if we're able to do that, then I think we can still snap the election from the Tories. And that's essentially what I'm interested in trying to work out methods of doing. And I think.
So this is your method.
Well, my method, obviously, I'm only limited in what I can do. I stand at Speaker's Corner. I've been speaking at Speaker's Corner for 30-something years, and and the other thing I know about is from the history of social unrest.
We actually thought,
We're all right, are we? Okay, thank you very much. All right, we managed to keep the camera with the police officers talking about it. Thank God for that. Well, I mean, you know, it would have made quite a good dispute actually, but never mind, change your minds. You know, no, you know how. I mean, for all my criticism of Extinction Rebellion around the issues around which they protested and the people behind them, Roger Hallam, who I did an interview with him, well, he's got this theory. And the theory goes that if you cause sufficient unrest and you get enough people, you know, when people join Extinction Rebellion, they're asked to sign a piece of paper, across a piece of paper, say, am I prepared to get arrested? Because they know that there's only so many police in London, so many cells in London, so much time available to the police in London, and therefore they voluntarily get themselves arrested in order to achieve, if you like, attention. Now, I'm not a supporter of Extinction Rebellion, but nevertheless, there is validity to the idea that if you want to get attention to the issues around which we are focused during this election, I think it's necessary to work out ways, dramatic, intelligent, effective mechanisms to get attention within British society to the big demands being raised by the Labour Party to bring about change in British society. Because you must remember, and it's been proven by detailed studies over the last few years, that Jeremy Corbyn has been consistently maligned by the mass media. About 80%, I don't know the exact statistic now, but there's a study carried out by the London School of Economics. About 80% of all media attention on Jeremy Corbyn since 2015 has been oriented to smearing him and slandering him.
Yeah.
And once you break through that smear and slander campaign, which is only really possible during a general election period, for the very simple reason is this. I produce a radio show that's broadcast on FM in London, and we are not allowed,
Why?
during the election, to make broadcasts that do not provide equal airtime to different points of view within the broadcast. So in other words, only now that an election is taking place is Jeremy Corbyn able to get equal access time to the media. And that is why during the last election, suddenly we rose 20% in the polls during the period of the election. That is already beginning to happen during this election. But I think we can help to escalate that, because the newspapers do not have to do that. The newspapers are still allowed to put out whatever they like. And so the headlines of the newspapers are always dramatic anti-Corbyn statements. So that you see the headline, like today's headlines, 1.2 trillion, I don't know the exact wording, but 1.2 trillion, Labour, madness and so on. Bankrupt the country and so on. Billionaires to leave, Jews to leave, all these sort of stories in the newspapers. Now I believe, as someone who has campaigned over many years for political change in Britain and internationally, has campaigned against wars. I was on the Berlin Wall 30 years ago. I lived in East Germany and I was fighting against the East German government 30 years ago. I lived in the East. I have a Stasi file where they watched over me. And I've spent my life, my adult life, trying to work out how to propagandize, how to explain ideas with simple slogans and concepts to millions of people, even with only a few people. And so that's what I'd like to try to discuss today, or to talk about today, is how that can be done. How you can explain ideas to people. How you can campaign in this election. Not just knock it, although it's great that people do that, and it's a traditional mechanism of campaigning, but the other traditional mechanisms of campaigning Many of them have been forgotten. For example, what I do at Speaker's Corner, standing up here with no megaphone, no microphone, no mechanical mechanism of raising my voice, apart from here a couple of video filmers at the moment. I use my voice like a soapbox speaker, which is how Labour was founded, how it developed, how it influenced the people, because we are not afraid, or we were not afraid, when we were genuinely campaigning for socialism, and I believe Jeremy Corbyn is a return to that tradition. We were not afraid of standing up in front of hostile audiences. We're not afraid of campaigning on street corners. We're not afraid of campaigning on pedestrianised streets. We're not afraid of campaigning, demonstrating, protesting and debating with our ideas and our arguments with anybody who comes along, no matter what point of view they have. We're not afraid of that argument. Whereas someone like Boris Johnson, you see him on television at his campaign launch, and it was at a great big hall in Birmingham, all blacked out. The hall itself could have had thousands of people in it, but he surrounded himself with an entourage of supporters, and those supporters were lit up, and then he makes a speech which is a pretend speech. It's a false speech. It's an artificial, created speech. It's not a human being interacting with others. It's a machine trying to manipulate the people to go out and cross a piece of paper, to carry through policies that are in direct contradiction to their interests in the name of some sort of theatrical campaigning performance organised by media and PR stunt manipulators rather than by real human beings discussing and debating the fate of society. And that, I believe, is the advantage we have. Now, in terms of campaigning, we were discussing, a few of us earlier on, about ways in which you can get ideas across. And for me, the central issue in this election is how does Momentum and the Labour Party get out and its supporters and people discussing the issues, how do we get out and mobilise kids from about 17, 18 years of age to 49 years of age? That's the layer where we know from consistently, from opinion poll after opinion poll, that Labour is ahead amongst that demographic. The age demographic will decide this election. We can win it by mobilising the youth. Well, it's what the data says.
Yeah, there's data there.
Right? The gentleman here's got the data here.
The tipping point is 40.
Right, show it to the camera here. Right. The tipping point is, what's the percentage amongst 49?
Amongst 49, 40 to 49 is 20,
hang on.
25 Labour, 32 Conservative.
Above 49?
Yes, no, 40 to 49.
Okay, below that then. Change that the other way around.
Okay, you're right.
I'm wrong, not 49.
30 to 39 is 30, 23.
30 what?
30% Labour, 23. The main problem
Tory.
seems to be the Lib Dems and the Green Party.
Right.
A lot of people are turning towards them.
Well, they say they're turning towards them. I think that's slightly incorrect. But the central argument I'm making, in any case, is based on this proposition that the youth vote is where we actually have the greatest support.
Massive support.
And in the last election, it was quite clear that it was the mobilisation of that youth vote that shifted the balance of forces within 5 weeks during the election campaign. When we get equal airtime, that's when the vote shifted towards Labour. And a lot of people, there was a quotation, I remember, it's just an anecdotal, but I think that anecdote sums it up. There was one woman, I heard her say, I was going to vote Tory, but my kids persuaded me we should go for Labour. My kids persuaded me we should go for Labour.
This election is different.
History, well,
This election is
you say it's different
to the
because the
last
Tories have told you to say it's different. They've made people think this is the Brexit election. Well, look, last election was during Brexit as well. don't forget all this bullshit from Boris Johnson. He's going to have to repeat the same argument right through the election. He doesn't actually have any serious policies or any policy agenda to represent the interests of the youth around the country. He's got none.
National Health Service.
What's that?
He wants shagging on the National Health Service.
He hasn't even said that. I mean, that might at least be a little bit amusing for him to propose. He goes into hospitals and tries to present himself as a supporter of the health service. He goes into schools and tries to present himself as a supporter of schools. But when he went to schools, they locked the kids in the other classes so they couldn't question him. When he went to a hospital, doctors started shouting at him. So it's not a very good campaign from that point of view. So he must rely upon trying to win over those who think, let's get Brexit done now. That's the only thing that matters. I think that actually is a limited demographic, and it's a lot more limited if we eat into it by getting young people to recognise where their interests lie and getting them to shift the balance of forces. And there are a number of campaign issues on which we can win the youth and win them decisively. And that, of course, don't forget, because Labour has about 300,000 to 500,000 members, maybe 100,000 actively involved in the campaign. It's true that no matter where you go at the moment, it's only Labour canvassers you're seeing out on the streets. Because we have got numbers. No matter what you think, we've got numbers. So the question is, how do we penetrate the minds and conversations of the masses in the run-up to Christmas around these issues? Now, some people might think that the idea of a Christmas election is a terrible thing for Jeremy Corbyn and the Labour Party. I don't think that's true. I don't think that's true. You know, human beings, you know, people like Dominic Cummings and the great PR gurus.
Is he human?
Apparently, you know, and they try and work out how to manipulate psychology. A friend of mine, he works as an actor, and I'm going to ask him to come down, and perhaps some of you might join us, to come down to a little demonstration outside Harrods. Anybody see the story? My friend, he often works as Santa Claus as an actor at Christmas time. And you may have seen the news story this week that in Harrods, you can only get into Santa's grotto if you spend £2,000 to get in there. No, it was Harrods. It was Harrods. Now, well, yes, there are euphemisms, and they're relevant. They're relevant to the psychology of this election campaign. Because the idea that Brexit is the central issue is a psychological manipulation by the establishment to try and get Boris Johnson into power. It's not because it's true. Boris Johnson couldn't give a shit about Brexit. He gives a shit about Brexit because that's how his path to power has been. Don't forget, years ago, just days before the Brexit campaign, he had not made up his mind whether to support Brexit or not. During Theresa May's time in power, was he a supporter of, wasn't he and Rees-Mogg the people hindering Theresa May's Brexit deal 3 times in a row? So they can't turn round now and say, oh my God, let's get Brexit done. After all, he was someone, along with Rees-Mogg and the ERG, who consistently argued that they can't accept Brexit as proposed by Theresa May. One time after another. It was their turning around and saying Jeremy Corbyn stopped it. Jeremy Corbyn had nothing to do with it. It was the ERG and it was the DUP who stopped Brexit being passed by the Tories. They had a frigging majority, don't forget. And Theresa May called an election because she couldn't get her own party to back her. Then she ended up in hock to the ERG and the DUP. Labour wasn't even in the discussion at that time. So the idea that Brexit has been stopped by Jeremy Corbyn is just a lot of bullshit. I mean, it's a pile of crap so big that people believe it's a building or it's some sort of great idea. It's just a pile of utter and complete bullshit. And of course, during the election campaign, as people argue with each other, generations argue with each other over the dinner table, the arguments of logic and fact, which younger people will tend to focus on, will begin to win the upper hand in preparation for this election. And therefore you'll find there will be huge shifts. We've already seen quite volatile polls taking place. Brexit Party on 12, Brexit Party on 6, Labour on 24, Labour on 27, Tories on 39, Tories on 31. In other words, the volatility is the very nature of this election. And therefore the discussions, when they take place amongst the mass of the population, can be shifted away from Brexit and onto the issues that Labour is stamping its mark
But
on.
the election's going to be decided in the marginal seats. That's how the Labour Party is approaching it,
Well, that's,
and the Tories.
I don't mind
That's
people
what's
saying
gonna
that.
swing it.
But you see,
30 seats.
what does that actually mean? For example, in London, how many people will be visiting Winter Wonderland this Christmas? In the run-up, it starts, I believe, next weekend, and then it runs up until the 12th. So between those days, you're talking about 100 to 150,000 people per day coming here. So the idea that knocking on the door in Basildon or knocking on the door in Kensington, Chelsea will have a bigger impact than having, for example, a platform here and talking to the people here and influencing the discussion here, I think that may be a mistake. The idea, and this is a problem, it is, I didn't say that, but I'm saying the idea that a marginal seat is located in a geographical discussion is incorrect. There will be millions of people every day, for example, 250,000 people go shopping in Oxford Street or walk down Oxford Street. Now it's true, maybe 100,000 of them are tourists. That leaves 150,000 people every day going down Oxford Street. Therefore, many of them will come from all different boroughs around London. So you can influence them by running campaigns that focus on the central demands, which are popular within the youth and can win the population to vote for Labour during for example, the 32-hour working week. Labour is proposing that there be a 4-day working week and a 32-hour working week within 5 years of Labour being in power. All this is about is a very, very simple calculation.
That idea was tried by Mr. Hollande, the French socialist leader. He had to withdraw it after 2 years.
My friend, there are balance of power. There are discussions about the viability or non-viability of policies. All fine, my friend, all fine. All fine for question time. All fine for news nights.
No, it's history.
All fine
It's
for
history.
historical
It's history
books.
of some
Not
European
fine,
countries.
not fine for an argument in an election. Elections, as you know, Boris Johnson, when he says, get Brexit done, it's a meaningless phrase. He's trying to use that slogan to get elected. And I have no qualms in saying the struggle for a 32-hour working week is a struggle. It's a struggle. A government can pass a law, but then it becomes a struggle. So the question is, how the central question I've got, because I know a 32-hour working week is a popular demand within the population, just as the abolition of tuition fees is a popular demand within the population. And therefore our problem at the moment is not to go into the nitty-gritty of how we get the 32-hour working week, important as that discussion is after the election. But only if you've got a government prepared to introduce it will it be relevant after the election. So we're after getting Jeremy Corbyn and the Labour Party elected, and that means how do we campaign on the demands they are making in the election to try and get that out to the population so they're prepared to say, yes, I support that, I'll vote for that, I'll campaign for that. And then they'll argue with their family and friends all the details that you're trying to raise. They can be discussed amongst them. But we won't discuss that and solve that question at Speaker's Corner. It's a battle of forces. The abolition of tuition fees. You know, there's someone on the internet that's been posting the last couple of days. And what they've done is this. Instead of having a Labour poster, vote Labour or vote Emma Dent Code or whatever, instead of having that, they did a handwritten sheet of paper, pen and paper, or a marker pen. Get one from the pound shop. Get a pile of sheets of paper and write why you think the Tories are shit, or why you think the abolition of tuition fees is a good idea, why you think a national bank to invest in the economy is good, etc., etc. Write them on a sheet of paper and stick it on a bus stop. That will have more impact on the psychology of people. And then take a photograph of it and spread it on the internet. But first, stick it on a bus stop. People read that stuff. They don't read what you stick through a door with a glossy brochure. The internet and modern communication systems have meant that people know when they're being manipulated. They know, or largely they know when they're being manipulated. And the more grassroots a campaign is, the more down to earth it is, the more people will believe that there's genuine people behind it and not some machine, some propaganda manipulation, not some Dominic Cummings and billionaires and backers from around the world. You know this lady's story about Boris Johnson and the many financial backers amongst billionaire class from Russia. So, and then they go on about Jeremy Corbyn being in the pay of the Russians. I mean, it beggars belief. So what we need to do is on a grassroots level. I'm not saying this for the sake of trying to make some speech at Speaker's Corner. I'm asking you to do it. If you support Labour getting elected, get out that sheet of, go to the pound shop, buy a marker pen, get a sheet of paper, write on it, get some sticky tape and stick it on the bus stop. Those things will influence people. That's what, in any revolution in history, it is the grassroots voice of the people that comes out.
What's happening at Harrods?
Not just, sorry?
What's happening at Harrods?
So at Harrods, what we should do, I will put it on the election campaign website of Momentum. I think it's called mycampaign.org, but I'll check it and I'll put it under the video when this is posted on YouTube. Yeah, I'll put the link to it under there, and on there I'll put the time and date for the thing outside Harrods, because that's the sort of thing, again, a grassroots action with 5 people blocking the door to Harrods with a placard, handwritten, saying Christmas for the many, not the few, with Santa Claus protesting outside. I think it will make the news. It's the sort of story that has an impact, and it clarifies the distinction between what we are arguing as a mass people-focused campaign to get the Labour Party elected, and what the Tories are doing, which is to organise a television media blitz, utilising government resources for months on end to try and manipulate the people into thinking the election is about Brexit. In fact, and even though it's a peculiar thing, the truth of the matter is, the woes of Nigel Farage at the moment are a very interesting phenomenon, because after all, the only person who actually incarnates Brexit as an individual is Nigel Farage. He led the UKIP, which demanded the election, which demanded the referendum. The loss of votes by the Tories to UKIP forced David Cameron to agree to a referendum if they won the election in 2015, which they did. Then when they called the election, it was only because Nigel Farage campaigned that they managed to win. He represented this so-called discontented northern working class voice, which he claims to represent. He incarnates that. And yet, when he launched his election campaign this year, his votes have been, his support in the opinion polls at least, has been tanking. Now that illustrates to me that despite what they're saying to us, this is not going to be an election focused entirely or even mainly on Brexit. People may be sick of the discussion about Brexit. People may want the whole thing out of the way, and God knows I do. God knows I do. And I've stated many times at Speaker's Corner, even a no-deal Brexit I don't think will be a disaster. I'm not in favour of it, but I don't think it'll be a disaster. Nor am I a supporter of the European Union, nor am I a supporter of Brexit. I am a supporter of socialism. That means an international transformation in the balance of wealth and power in favour of the overwhelming majority of the population in Britain and worldwide. We have a worldwide system of governance. The big questions, and that's not political governance, that's not Chancellor Merkel telling us what we must do. It's global corporations controlling the world's economy and the direction in which it goes. And that is what really matters in this world. And it is to break their power, the Uberization. Amazon, for example, let me tell you a story about Amazon. Yesterday or 2 days ago, I bought something on Amazon. Somehow they manipulated me one day to sign up to Amazon Prime, and I haven't been able to get out of it. And so I said, okay, Amazon Prime is handy. I'll get this microphone connected to my speaker so I can go out campaigning the election. I'll get it tomorrow. So I wait for this Amazon delivery, and then I get a message. Your delivery will be delayed. It may arrive sometime next week. So then I looked up, can I phone somewhere to get something sorted? No phone number on Amazon website. Amazon is a multi hundreds of $billion organization. No phone number to phone. I get on a chat line to Amazon staff. It starts out with a machine talking to me. You think you're talking to a human being, you're talking to a machine. And then eventually a human being comes on. And I said, I do not want to talk to another person. I want you to write me an email explaining why I'm paying for a service that says it's going to deliver next day and delivers 5 days. It's twice I've booked from them, twice a week late or not arrived at all. Uber, what about the wages, conditions and living standards of the people working for these shitty companies, cycling around risking their lives around the whole of London, dashing in and out from one place to another, treated like chattel slaves. And then they turn around and say immigration, take control of our borders. Our 39 frigging Vietnamese died last week. 39. They're already in Europe. Our borders. There's a bloody lorry driving into it. You're never going to be able to check every frigging lorry. Once you impose these insane, if you like, witch hunts against foreigners, then of course you're going to get situations like that where people die in these lorries. Now nobody wants, and these people, by the way, they would not have ended up on the National Health Service scamming on us. They would have worked up doing the nail bars. They would have worked in bloody workplaces in Britain. So what are they talking about?
They have 30 grand to come in to pay each.
Exactly, so they're not exactly sure how they can be parasites here. They pay money to arrive here. They're already in Europe, my friend. These people were already in Europe. They arrived in Europe, they got family members, friends here, they want to arrive here. So, I mean, neither here nor there. 39 Vietnamese, but it's a lot worse. Even the people who support every aspect of Brexit, their hearts are moved when they see that, because they know it's about global political economy. Those same people who might complain about it are quite happy to go on Amazon.com or eBay and buy products made in Vietnam by child labour They're quite happy to engage with that economy back in Vietnam, but they're not prepared to have those human beings, the social consequence of those policies. They're not prepared to have them come here, unless, of course, they suddenly realise the horrors that happen as a consequence of that. And on the other side, you go down here, and you look in the Grosvenor Hotel, and you get these type of people. Anybody see the story this morning? The French government, not the French government, sorry, some French Historical Social Science Institute. They had this, there's a Russian guy. Do you see the story this morning? He dresses Napoleon. He's welcome in France because he's a big representative of Napoleonic, if you like, heritage. So he was caught having chopped up his girlfriend, chopped her head off, chopped her arms off, chopped her legs off, and he had her arms in his rucksack, and he was drunk after all. He was celebrating having got rid of most of the body. He fell into the river, and the police pulled him out and found that he'd chopped up his girlfriend. And then they said in the newspaper, on the BBC website, actually, not even the newspaper, they said, his lawyer had said, quotation, because he looks like a respectable man, they said, he's been under a lot of stress recently. He's been under a lot of stress. He chopped his girlfriend's head off. If it would have been Jihadi John, right? Slightly different story would have been in the news, right? Jihadi John and all his entourage are monsters. But when this guy, and look at this, why am I raising this? Because the Grosvenor Hotel is full of billionaires from Russia, Eastern Europe, the Middle East, who chop people up for a living, right? They sell weapons, chop people up, sell manacles. The British government exports weapons to Saudi Arabia. What are they talking about? In Yemen, millions of people have been brought to the edge of starvation, hundreds of thousands of people apparently killed, and yet the news was only talking about it when Saudi Arabian oil fields were attacked, right? So it's only when their pockets are affected that they talk about these things. So we need to invert the reality. Write down on paper what you think against the Tories. Your personal view. It doesn't matter whether you think it's eloquent or not. Put what you think down on a sheet of paper and stick it on a bus stop. Handwritten. When China, in 1979, when the Chinese government feared that the masses would begin to demand things. You know what they have? In China, they have their tradition. And it's called democracy wall. And on democracy wall, you use calligraphy. And you write what you think, and you stick it on the wall. That's where we're at in Britain. That's where we're at. We have media manipulation. We have the twisting of minds. We have the artificial intelligence experts all trying to manipulate you through Facebook adverts. You don't even see. They look at your email. When you go on Google, they check all your emails and they sell your data to these companies. And then adverts appear in your YouTube channel or whatever to manipulate you.
Like in China?
Well, it is like that, yes. In fact, it's worse than China. Because here, the advertising industry is much smarter than the Chinese advertising industry. In China, you have a governmental Communist Party dictatorship. And therefore, the message is pretty hard sell. So they don't try the tiny manipulation, microscopic manipulation, which they try in Britain during the Brexit campaign last time.
Yeah, but I didn't see any concentration camps here, and I didn't see people being prisoners at that home here.
Because you forget, this is Remembrance Day. And on Remembrance Day, we remember 2 world wars in the last 100 years, 120 years. 2 world wars. What were they about? Were they not about concentration camps? Were they not about death camps? Were they not about the enslavement of people all around the world? They were.
Do we have them now?
You asked. We had Guantanamo Bay. We had Abu Ghraib. Abu Ghraib, the British tortured. The Americans tortured. 30,000 Iraqis. And Afghanis were tortured as well.
When was that?
In the last 15 years. Right? So, and we have had, don't forget, we have also had, you know, they talk about the Berlin Wall. They talk about the Berlin Wall. I was there fighting against the East German government. But don't forget this. In Ireland, in Northern Ireland, we still have walls dividing the communities. And by the way, we're going back there if Boris Johnson gets his way. We're going back to that if Boris Johnson gets his way. And America's trying to build a wall, and they've got prison camps on the border where they're detaining the people.
They had those before Trump.
Sorry?
They had those before
Well,
Trump.
okay, they're worse now. I don't know if they had them before Trump,
Why
but
did
they're worse
nobody
now.
mention them before Trump?
Sorry?
Why did nobody mention them before Trump?
That's another issue.
No, there were no walls.
It's fine to discuss
I lived
those
in
things,
Texas.
but
There were no walls whatsoever.
No,
You are a
he's
typical.
He's talking about the.
No,
he's
he's
talk-
talking
hang on,
about-
he's talking about the detention camps.
No, but she needs to disagree with me.
They have the
No matter
summer
what I say.
camp.
We don't need to go there now.
How are you going to
Yeah,
galvanise?
you need to be everywhere, don't you?
Of course.
I mean,
How
for
you-
God's sake.
spoken to you
What
in
it-
weeks.
I know, because you looked stupid last time you spoke.
Oh, really?
How are you going to
Yes, yes.
How are you going to
Then you
galvanise?
turn up as Julius Caesar the next week.
How are you going to galvanise the working class vote in the north?
Well, no, I just wonder what happens. I don't care what you dress as.
How are you going to motivate? How are you going to motivate the working class vote in the north?
I believe that's a question of youth. Can we get the youth in the north of Britain, who generally come from these working class communities and whose parents would have voted a few years ago, don't forget it's 2016, the referendum. 2016 and now is 3 years, so we've got a whole new layer of young people come onto the electorate. Then there's the young people anyway, they were more likely to vote against Brexit. But in any case, whether you voted Brexit or not is not, in my opinion, how to decide how you should vote this election. You should vote according to the interests that represent the working people of this country. 32-hour working week, the abolition of tuition fees. Now they're talking about a universal income. I agree with that universal income. There's no harm. Why do you need to treat people who are living on the edge of society like shit? We're one of the wealthiest countries in the history of the world. Technology, science, and culture has advanced exponentially since the year 2000. The year 2000 in Britain, about 20% of the population had a reasonable internet connection. Now everyone's on the internet. Everyone's got a mobile phone connection or a home connection. We are in a totally different technological world. And yet, living standards have crawled along or remained stagnant. Right throughout the period of the greatest technological revolution in history. What sort of joke is that? Every advance in technology should result in an improvement in the living standards and the life conditions and the quality of life of the people.
They did that. The Labour Party did that in the 1970s.
That
and
is
it
what
worked.
we must return to.
You reckon
That's what we must
But do
return
they believe that that's going to happen? Do they believe that's going to happen?
Victorian era. My friend, I said since the year 2000. We do not live much better than in the year 2000. And in fact, in many ways, for many people, they're a lot worse off than they were in the year 2000.
Can we really go back
How
to
does
the
that figure?
1970s, though? Can we
How
really
does it figure?
Can we really go back to the 1970s? The
We
way
can
things were.
establish, we can establish, and it can start in one or two countries.
We don't have the manufacturing base.
What are you talking about? Nowadays, manufacturing is the mental process. All you require is a mental process. Three-dimensional objects that you can create. We have the robots. We have three-dimensional printers that can print a frigging house or an aeroplane. We have three-dimensional printers that can replace any object, not only a plumbing object in your house.
So what is there for the
any
working
object
people?
in
What
your
jobs
body,
are there for
in
working
your
people?
body. I took a group of neuroscientists from King's College last week on my walking tour, and they were telling me they are producing neurons to replace dying neurons in the human brain. We are 20 or 30 years away from the technical ability to be able to strengthen and reproduce the power of the brain, even when its cells die away. And hopefully, this is what they're investigating now at King's College.
when those same areas of the brain.
So what jobs will the Labour Party create for working people? What jobs will the Labour Party?
So you see, the focus on the National Health Service is actually the most important focus. Not because it's dear to our hearts and we all love it, but because it is the greatest focus of scientific and technical improvement in the capacity of Britain that can be developed.
How does that help the working class?
As I was just about to say, we can grow the organs of your body in advance of their degeneration to replace those organs with new organs. So when your heart fails, we won't have to put a mechanical pump in there. We'll be able to replace it.
That's lovely, but people want a job, they want a house, they want a holiday, they want a good life.
My friend, the health service in Britain is one of the biggest employers in the world. It employs over 2 million people. It is a larger employer than General Motors, than Amazon, than Google, than Facebook. The problem is, the National Health Service, instead of being used for the benefit of developing improvements in drugs, healthcare and welfare for the people, at the moment it has been used for a period of around 2 decades as a mechanism for private companies to plunder state investment and state resources and state manpower.
That's not a bread and butter issue. What about the workers?
Bread and butter.
Bread and butter issue.
You're nearer to a heart attack than I am by the look of it. It will be a bread and butter issue then. Right?
No, it's not bread and butter. It's heart attack
look
business,
at my
isn't
teeth.
it?
Fucked. Look at your teeth. Fucked. When I was a child,
thank you.
Right? When I was a child, all dental treatment was free on the National Health Service. All of it. And so it should be today. We need to focus on the health service.
Wait, Heiko, so you want the health
My
care?
friend.
You want the healthcare to be free?
Yes.
You think it will
Well,
get
I don't
more
want it to be free. It is free, but unfortunately, we're paying over the nose for it because we're subsidising the private plunder of the National Health
Okay,
Service.
fair enough. Private plunder, whatever.
Yes.
You want it to be free, and you think
It
it will
is
get
free.
more job to people.
Of course it will.
And if it's free, the people's taxes will pay for it. So basically, people are working and are getting money, and that money is going back for the taxes that are going to get them the job. It's a closed circle. It makes no sense.
What do you mean it makes no sense?
Makes no sense,
Closed
like
circle makes perfect sense.
it makes perfect
Workers
sense.
work.
But
and
it's a
produ-
vicious
One
circle.
minute. No, you say closed circle.
Yeah, a vicious circle.
Now you're using.
It's not producing
Now
wealth.
you're
That's what he's
Okay.
saying. It's not producing
My
wealth.
friend,
Games of semantics.
fixing your teeth is not producing wealth.
No, it's not.
Tell that to any
Why are you
dentist
focusing
surgery.
on his teeth?
Tell that to any dentist surgery.
Because my teeth are
I
fucked,
said my
evidently.
teeth are fucked. I said my teeth are fucked and so are his. Right?
Yeah.
So it's not his teeth I'm focusing on.
My teeth are not.
You keep my teeth
Well,
out of
that's
it.
all right then, isn't it? Yours will always be perfect, won't they?
Thank you. Thank you.
So,
Apparently there's
so
no
ask
need for
yourself
free
this.
dental care.
If you
I
work,
just need to take care
okay,
of your
a
teeth.
closed circle. If you work in the
vicious
National Health Service and you receive a wage of £30,000 a year as a nurse, and then you pay your mortgage, you pay your bills, you pay your Uber, you pay your transport, you pay your food, and then you go to work every week until you're 65 years of age, and you pay part of your taxes towards the health service, and the health service makes developments in technology, in drugs, in provision for the people, and that improves the life expectancy of someone like yourself or him or me. I'm sorry, where is that negative?
We live longer, it costs everyone more money. For starters, they want us to die at 65, just before retirement.
They
Or
want us to
67
die
in
at
my case.
65 because capitalism is a system that plunders the public resources. So rather than, for example, the park being available to a national debate on the future of this country running up to Christmas time,
We've got circus.
we have a circus, right?
Yeah, but we've
because
got one of it
because the
further down
park
in Westminster.
doesn't have enough money to pay for itself without selling off part of the park for part of the year. That's all it's about. And therefore, closed circle, my friend, is an important thing to understand. Closed circles are What you mean by that, I presume,
I said vicious
is self.
circle
No,
eventually,
you
but
use vicious
you
circle
know-
afterwards.
Exactly, after.
We
So
need
you
to
have
create
understand
wealth.
it-
We need to create wealth. That's
understand
the
it
thing.
better. Heiko, because look, okay, I will go over it again because you didn't seem to
Do you have
understand
a vote
what I
in this
meant.
election?
I will go over
Do
it
you
again.
vote in this election?
Sorry?
Do you have a vote?
A vote?
No, he
For the
wouldn't
election? No, I
vote.
don't.
No, it doesn't vote.
Why does it matter?
I just wondered whether I should be trying to convince you.
Oh, wow. So if I
Or
don't
whether I'm
have a
wasting my
vote,
time.
okay, wait. So if I don't have a vote, I don't matter.
No, it's just
Basically,
Too late, Heiko. Too late. You should not have gone
the
that
issue
way.
is this.
You should not have gone
The
that
issue
way.
is this. We have a general election in Britain at the moment, right?
Indeed.
A lot of people who are in Britain who can vote are interested either online or in the meeting, right? That doesn't mean anyone from outside shouldn't be saying what they think. But to be fair, you do wander from one camera to another at Speaker's Corner to get attention for yourself.
When?
All day long.
Okay, wait.
All
Okay,
day long
this
on
is
Sundays.
getting very personal now. This is getting very personal.
I know. I'm just
No,
trying to
no,
explain.
No, wait.
Everybody
Heiko,
says
wait,
that.
lady,
Not
I don't
only
want
him,
to focus on
everybody says that.
lady,
all
You
about
are
you.
a camera
Don't
whore. That's what you
Don't
are.
bother.
What about the
Camera
Lib Dems and the
whore.
Green
Tell your
Party?
puppy to
That's
sit.
What
what
about
you
the Lib
are.
Dems and
It's
the
all
Green?
about you, that's all.
What about the Lib Dems and the Green Party?
Fucking camera.
No, I won't.
You know what I mean?
No, I
You want
won't.
attention?
No,
Go
I
over
won't.
there.
What about the Lib Dems and the Lib?
Okay, guys.
It's your meeting.
No, wait.
This
Wait,
was
no,
about the
personal.
Labour Party.
You made
Now
it
it's your
personal.
meeting,
You
is
made
it?
it personal. Now let's finish.
Because I don't want
You
to
made it
engage in
personal.
discussion
Now
about
let's
crap
finish.
with you.
Yeah, because you
How's the
can't
Labour
engage
Party
in
going to deal with the Lib Dems?
The next week you'll be back down here in
the one who
fucking
started
Julius
making
Caesar
this
outfit.
Because
You'll look on
Julius Caesar,
YouTube.
it was Tywin
You'll look on
Lannister. It
YouTube,
was Tywin
and everyone will
Lannister,
say,
Game of Thrones, watch
"What
the
an
show
idiot!
before
Why
you
does he
speak."
get involved in every single meeting?"
Of course.
You can look on content of everything,
Only-
and they'll find
only
7 hours of
insecure
you
people
today,
like
won't
you,
we?
insecure
7
people like
hours of
you
your presence.
care about the comments.
What's the matter with you?
You're very insecure, Heiko.
I'm not insecure
and you
at
care
all, my
about the
friend.
comments. Now listen to me.
What's the
I
Labour
want-
Party
wait,
gonna
wait,
do
wait,
about
wait.
the Greens
I want
and about
from
the Lib
discussion
Dem
to
vote?
discussion. Not from camera, not from camera to
It is
camera.
from camera to
Not from
What you
camera
going to do
camera,
about
from
the
discussion
about
to
You had a
discussion.
mic on you earlier
Heiko,
on.
have you
How
been
long were you
following
on the
me?
video?
Have you been following me?
I don't give a fuck, my friend.
Yeah, exactly. You don't know what I'm doing.
What are you going to do about the Lib Dems and the Green Party?
Speaker's Corner, camera hall.
Heiko,
Right?
you are
for
an
you.
empty-headed fool
now,
who
please, not
thinks
now.
you're bringing something new to the table.
I'm just discussing the
things
issues
you're
of the day in
explaining
Britain.
here,
What-
as if you
It doesn't
know
need
the
you.
truths of
What's
the
Labour
world.
going to do about the Lib Dems
Topic.
and the Green Party?
Yeah,
Because they're going to split the vote. The Lib Dems and the Green Party, they're going to split the Labour vote in many areas, they think. They're a major danger,
Where
they
we are
think.
unable to get the message across that this election needs to focus on the demands of the mass of the people for improving their lives. Where we're unable to get that message across, and where the message of Brexit or remains dominant, yes, we will lose out. I don't deny that. It's an unfortunate fact.
I think the Labour
of the
vote will
manipulation of
hold up in
ideology.
the north. The Labour vote will hold up in the north.
I believe we can get that message across, and I think Jeremy Corbyn thinks that, and that's how we're working. If we don't, we don't. We've got until December the 12th. That's why the urgency, that's why the rudeness. Because we're in a general
Rudeness
election
from you.
year.
You're the one
This is
going
the big,
personal.
yes, okay.
You're the one going
terribly
personal.
sorry.
The most
but I don't need
important,
to
the most
discuss that
important
now.
election
Yeah,
for a
but
generation.
excuse
It's the
me.
most important election
For a
in
generation.
Britain in my lifetime.
Excuse me.
In your lifetime?
In my lifetime, yes.
Why-
And that's
why-
why.
why
Why?
don't you-
Because
Even Thatcher?
Lab-
Even Thatcher?
Yes, but we didn't have a Labour Party. We
Yeah,
had a
but
party controlled by goons.
listen.
You don't have a Labour Party, you have a load of Marxists.
We don't have many Marxists.
What?
I am a Marxist. I'm the Labour Party. There's very few others.
Why-
But there are some, but
Why
they're
are-
not many.
Why
But
are children
what-
saying vote sorry? Their own Labour people are saying don't vote Jeremy.
What are you talking about?
You saw the
You
paper the
know
other
damn
day.
well he's not a Labour member. He left the Labour Party. He's been supporting the Tory Party for some time, and he's a saboteur. There are many saboteurs. That's not going to affect the election, I assure you. Anti-Semitism will not affect the election, and saboteurs will not affect the election. Because it's been going on non-stop for years.
What about Tom Thingybob leaving?
He's not going to affect the election either.
Yeah,
Won't affect the election.
listen.
He's gone because he knows he's got no more influence in the Labour Party. That's why he's gone.
Listen.
Good.
In politics, it's very important to form alliances. So, whom or what party could possibly be seen as a possibility of an alliance on the point of view of Labour Party.
Any election, no party, unless it's a tiny party, no major party, is going to stand up and say, we're going to make an alliance with them. Not unless you've got proportional representation. So in Britain, first past the post means that. So of course, even if they were prepared to talk about an SNP deal afterwards, that's irrelevant, and no one's going to say that, because we need to campaign to get Labour elected with a majority. Whether we do it or not, well, that's a battle to happen now in the next few weeks. That's it. That will decide it. So that's the campaign we focus on. Forget about deals and election pacts. Irrelevant for now. Now we need to get Labour elected by campaigning on the issues that will be appealing to young people. If we can mobilise the youth, we can win the election. Simple as that. Simple as that.
Yeah, but the youth is not on your side, right?
The youth is on our side.
Not really, no.
Show him again.
They are. They're getting the Labour's getting the majority of the vote under
of young
40.
people support the Labour Party. Or
Under
better
40.
said,
Under
biggest
40. The majority of
any
youth
group
from
correct
about
what I said
18
earlier
to
on.
about 40.
Those under 40
majority are
overwhelmingly
voting
supporting
Labour.
Labour rather than the other party.
Labour doesn't have a lot of
Yes,
support overall.
large-scale polls. So we have the capacity to win this election on that basis. Okay, I'm going to call a halt for now. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. Very good. Very, very good. Very
Nice
good.
add-on,
Excellent. Very good. Very, very good.
Notice this. No cameras around. I'm still talking. Notice this.
Yeah, that's 2 seconds.
There is.
That's 2 seconds. There's
There
a
is.
camera here, my camera.
Here it is.
Camera here, mate.
And it's live as well.
I'm not shaking your hand. You've disrespected me, and I'm not shaking your hand.
Oh, gross.
Not all about
No,
you,
no, no,
mate.
no,
All the
no, no,
fucking
no,
Okay. Anyway,
Very
Let's hope there is Brexit. We don't have to see him anymore.
serious and manly move.
Do you know these guys? It's chicken. I saw him buying tons of chicken. Tons. So, something wrong. No, we are what we eat. It's true. We are what we eat.
From your man, say it straight. Man, don't listen to BBC. Man, don't listen to ITV.
I'm gonna go home. I just stopped talking to these naughty children. No, I'm joking with them. They're kids. I'm joking. I'm saying to you that look, if there's a situation where more women are committing suicide, then we have to look at the reasons in the extent.
Because society wants to be like whores. Like women should be like traditional, like female, feminine women. Like in Eastern Europe, go to Greece, go to Russia. We're not actually proper women. You look at this country, it's disgusting. It's masculine. It's like horrible. It's like lesbian. No, I don't approve of it. I disavow. Disavow. It needs to be make women again.
You're gonna get married
Make women again.